record. And I'm going to record the audio starting in 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have a special guest. His name is Misha Hyman, and he is the founder and CEO of the Health Warrior Project. And he has followed in his family's footsteps as an innovative healer in the world of functional medicine. Hyman subscribes to the belief that food is medicine and is an advocate for the urban farming industry. Chef Misha, a former athlete and a former member of the 300-pound club, created the Health Warrior Project in the hopes of educating people to reach their highest levels of health, flexibility, and overall well-being through conscious eating and bringing in mindful practices into their daily routines. Our battle to take back our health starts at home, and Hyman aims to embody what it means to go from white coat to white apron. I love that, by the way. Or, in other words, from the doctor's office to the kitchen. And today, Chef Misha and myself, we're going to talk about some of the biggest food myths that people think are healthy. And I think that there's no one better to discuss this with than with Misha. I actually saw him at the Biohacking Congress not long ago, and we connected on stage. I listened to his lecture, and I tell you guys, listen to Chef Misha, and he's got some like great advice to offer all of us. So with that, welcome, Misha. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much for having me. It was great being on that panel with you. Thank you for moderating. I think that was the closing panel that we had at the whole biohacking Congress, and it really kind of really reminded me that there are a lot of people that are out there that don't know all these things that we maybe take for granted, and we really need to kind of spread the message. So I'm so glad to be on your podcast and glad to be here.
Yeah, we actually had a lot of fun. So for anybody who's listening, I think I posted that panel on my YouTube channel. You can watch it. And it's also on the Biohacking Congress YouTube channel. It was just so much fun because I think we all had really synergistic energies and we provided a lot of great information. So, I don't know if although all of us at the Biohacking Congress know your background and your history, I would love for you to tell the listeners your background.
Yeah, so I grew up, I think, just like anybody else, who went to school with their parents who potentially were, how do I say, you know, they were called macrobiotic. They were called crunchy granola back in the day as almost like a slur, but ultimately people that just didn't let their kids eat junk food at home and at school. So I used to get made fun of a lot, basically at school because instead of having fruit roll up fruit by the foot, I would have, the fruit leather or the thing that maybe is, has no high fructose corn syrup. So I grew up with a father who was a functional medicine doctor and a mother who was a nurse practitioner. And food, we always had gardens in our when we grew up. I lived in Western Massachusetts, so we kind of really easy to have a small little garden in the backyard. But ultimately, I probably had an advantage over the common American child at that time of just being able to eat food that you grow in your backyard, and just every whole meal that we had, every meal we'd have at home would be a whole meal, right? Just like brown
Mhm.
rice or one a piece of protein and some vegetables from the garden and so on and so forth. So when I went to college, I actually had and I went to I was a big athlete. Basketball was like my dream. I wanted to play professional sports as a career. And I found that out in college that I probably wasn't going to do that. So I had a sports radio show and minored in sports nutrition, but was always trying to gear myself towards, working in professional sports. And while I was had probably a junior or a sophomore and junior in college, I was basically cooking for a lot of my friends who didn't even know how to fry an egg or boil water. And I went to school in Central Florida, and most of the people I was around, it was like a liberal arts school, so they're kind of from all over, but no one knew the basic information of nutrition and how to cook anything. So fast forward a year, I actually was, big into sports still, was playing intramurals and, always wanting to, be in good shape. And then I had a girlfriend. Do you know the term chubby chaser? Sandy, have you heard this term before?
I have heard it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I actually have a article I can send you that I wrote, but essentially I, dated this woman that was the first time in my life, I had someone that wouldn't make fun of me for being a little chubby or being having a little, being bloated after a big meal. With my father being a functional medicine doctor, that was a big thing for him when we would actually, my sister and I would overeat. He would kind of like mock us or shame us and grab our little belly if we ever had anything, hanging through our shirts, whatever. So it was pretty traumatic for us. So little body dysmorphia was there for my sister and I. And when I was dating this woman in college, she almost encouraged me to, or did encourage me to gain the weight. So I gained 320, I gained 127 pounds. So I was like 208 to like 334 or something, 335
Wow.
within 8 months. And then I
Holy
lost, ended up
smokes.
losing the weight in 7 months because I realized I had to just like, change my life around. I was 21 years old. I think I can send you a photo. It's on my Instagram um, of me at like 260. So even like 60 pounds less than my peak. Um, and it was like pretty obvious I had to change my life. So this kind of got, and how I did that was by basically going keto and doing a lot of like Vietnamese pho, so kind of bone broth before bone broth. I wouldn't have noodles. So that was my diet. It was like keto burgers and on lettuce wrap sandwiches and like pho. And that was like my only meal really. Um, so I was working in Washington, D.C. for the Washington Wizards and basketball operations. So it was like, there was a pho restaurant right there for lunch. So I would eat lunch, my first meal of the day at like 4 p.m., 4:30, then I eat it really fast and the day ends at 6. So I kind of like would just intermittent fast all day before intermittent fasting was a thing. This was like 2012, 2013. And, um, I kind of learned how to, take care of yourself, be the own CEO of your health and kind of use food to get you out of a bad, in chronic disease. My father always talked about how chronic disease really helped. It really was was an aspect of a standard American diet. A lot of inflammation, a lot of refined foods, refined sugars. So ultimately, I kind of had the playbook to do what I could do. So that got me on a mission to help others, coach others. I became a chef and sort of catering for people who were really suffering. So a lot of doctors and a lot of nutritionists they give their patients or their client a plan, but they don't like how do you put that plan onto the plate, right? Okay, if you eat these foods, you don't eat those foods, but like how do you turn that into an actual plan to follow very easily? And that's kind of my mission is to teach people how to eat whole real food, affordable. You could basically have for a family of five, let it go to a McDonald's, spend $75, or you can go to like the grocery store and spend maybe $25 on getting one whole piece of chicken, a bunch of vegetables, and making it happen. So that was my plan, and then I kind of got in this wellness space really because I kind of wanted to fix my own issues, and then when I saw that I could do it so easily with this protocol, it almost was like um, a sense of like a purpose of I have to do this to teach people this that it's not so hard. And a lot of people that a lot of people are struggling lifelong chronic disease battles because they don't just make one or two simple micro adjustments. So that's kind of my purpose, and the Health Warrior Project is kind of the umbrella under all of that to really teach people that it's a battle against your health and your longevity in your life. And if you don't take it seriously, you're probably going to lose the battle. So that's kind of my
Mm.
ethos.
You mentioned a few really important like nuggets while you were talking. So one of them was mindful eating and the fact that you gained all this weight during a short period of time. And I'm going to guess that mindful eating is a piece of what helped you to lose
Yeah,
it. Would you
yeah,
agree? And
yeah,
then there's obviously food as medicine. There's a lot of components to what you just said that we can really kind of take that apart, that it can help other people who are listening to this. Because I'm a big believer that our experience really and it fuels our passion. And one of the things that you also said was how you grew up. So I grew up Eastern European. My parents are immigrants from Croatia. They did not believe in buying food. They always believed in cooking everything.
Mhm.
So I learned from them
Yeah.
that, if you ate out, it was a special treat. But, like now my parent, like they're farmers, right? So they grew up on farms. And so I now, before when you're younger, you don't always listen. And now I'm like, tell me, how did you do this? How did you store your apples for the season so that you would have them all winter? They would literally put them in the ground and then cover them with hay. Like we are talking old school, Misha. And it's almost like everything old is like coming back to new, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you didn't want to interrupt you, but yes, exactly. So kind of one of my whole, missions in the Health Warrior Project is to work with farms, work with urban farmers in like really tight urban areas, and also regenerative farms and now food forests. So I'm working with this guy, Jim Gale. Have you been following my social media at all? But I think I
Yep.
sent you a video. So this guy, Jim Gale, is probably the forward thinker and leader and kind of mover in kind of food forestry in the globe. And he has like 18 countries they're already activating. He was the first person to grow organic or harvest organic rice in China in like decades. And he's really doing a lot of amazing, amazing work. And he has kind of this headquarters, so to speak, or prototype location, 51 acres in St. Cloud, Florida, which I'm working with him on building actually a biohacking healing center, which is my other company, the Biohaus, which maybe you can
Mm.
come in since you have some background in farming now. And we have 2 locations in Toronto we're launching, which we definitely need to connect you with.
Yeah.
But essentially, the goal is to, you're right. It's like going out to eat is a treat, but now we've almost flipped that dichotomy in the 1950s with convenient dinners and having McDonald's. Like we just say, the reason why McDonald's in America, the historical purpose was to actually for highways. So on highways, people could stop and get a meal and not just be like screwed for 800 miles. So it actually was a reason for American growth, and now it's a reason for Americans' degradation or the West degradation,
Yeah.
global. So I think one thing to think about that Jim keeps pushing is one of the biggest kind of screw you to the government is to kind of change the narrative of this industrial food complex because after the basically World War II. I think you actually talked about how this is, maybe I'm jumping ahead in your questions, but World War II basically created a system in America, especially, and also in Canada, where you had to create an industrial food complex to actually create supplies and work on the supply chain to beef it up, so we could send products and food and things overseas. And then there was something called the Victory Gardens. Are you familiar with this term?
No, no.
So Eleanor Roosevelt did a whole the fireside chats when they would talk to America on the radio to kind of make them kind of it was the first form of podcast really to make people kind of feel like connected and safe and really know what's going on during it was like during even during the Great Depression times and so on. So what she basically begged America to do is build victory gardens, which were farms in the front of their lawns or in the back of their property to actually take the burden off the supply chain so we could send more products overseas. And if you look at the time in history in America, it is the least time of chronic disease, hypertension, mental illness, abuse, domestic violence, alcoholism, so on and so forth, because people are actually eating whole real food and they're being told they're being told by the government. Maybe back then we had a more idealistic view of the government and we think everything is in our best interest. But ultimately, that's why our system is kind of gerrymandered. And then when you have the industrial food complex, chopping out, kind of cardboard tasting food, you have the sugar industry trying to sell sugar and then demonize fat to basically make things Oreos and these crap foods to have more taste. There's a lot of information on that. I can send you more on that. But essentially, that is what kind of screwed us over, I think, as a people in a race, is we've actually economized, getting really convenient food and then having they would sell like TV dinners, and that was like a big thing in the 50s and 60s. Like, oh my God, how cool are we to be watching color TV and having dinner in the microwave? And that was a
Yeah.
luxury, right? And that's not
Yeah.
luxury. That's garbage, right? If you look at it now, no one would eat any of those TV dinners. But back in the
Swanson. What was
yeah,
it? Swanson?
yeah, Swanson, Campbell's, all that. I mean, all that stuff. Hungry Man, yeah. But so I think what we have to really realize is a lot of these things that are happening to us, you know, in evolution, in terms of evolution, it's only like blink of an eye. So we can actually turn it back pretty quick in 2 or 3 generations, or maybe even sooner, if we take charge of our health, take charge of our communities, kind of have it almost be like a city by city basis, not like a uprising of cities kind of trying to do something different to create a revolution, to actually say we have to be responsible for the health of our people and our, health of our constituents in our areas. And one way to do that is to create food forests everywhere. Where the whole point of a food forest, it's not a farm, it's not a regenerative farm, it's not an urban farm. You don't have to hire anybody to harvest. You basically, the food is just ready to get picked, and if it doesn't get picked, it turns into compost and creates more food. And maybe one person a month can come pick food, but ultimately it's the local community, and whether it's homelessness, whether it's people in their cul-de-sacs. We actually have the ability now to do this, and that's why I'm working with Jim Gale. And I'd love to bring you in on more of this conversation in Canada, because actually the head of partnership, Sky Matthew, lives in Ontario, so he's right there. I think in Toronto. I'm not sure, but the whole point is, yeah, you had this background, with your parents being from Eastern Europe, where going out to eat was a luxury. We've now turned that almost into it's still a treat for people, but it's more like uh, a commonplace. I mean, I'm also not even like, I'm traveling a lot. I've been eating out so much, and I eat out a lot in general because I'm always like cooking, and it's shocking. And I always kind of try to get healthy stuff, but it's shocking to see how many people just do it because they think it's cheaper, they think it's more affordable. But go to the grocery store, you can get $300 worth of groceries, probably last you 2 or 3 weeks, and do the math. Like it's not as complicated as you think. But if we have our own food growing in our backyards, in our front yard, in our community centers, in our schools, in our prisons, in our hospitals, and you create CSAs everywhere, and there's so much abundance. The brand's called Food Forest Abundance. If there's abundance, no one needs anything, right? And that's
Yeah.
kind of the premise of my mission now, probably the next 20, 30 years, even more, is how do we get every area of land that's basically a desert or a food desert, or even places in Canada, you can have these greenhouses that are super low tech. You can do geothermal stuff, and you bury stuff into the ground, and you can have food for thousands and thousands of people per acre.
I
You were
think,
right.
yeah, I think that's like the big thing right there, what you said. I see um there's a divisiveness in this train of thought, that some people say, we didn't even touch on genetically modified
Yeah.
organisms yet, but some people say it's a good thing because we can make more and we can feed the population. And then other people are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're talking about GMOs and feeding the population, and then you've got a McDonald's at every single street corner. You've got like, is it overconsumption? Okay, I understand there are parts of the world that do need food, that are starving, but you look at North America specifically, and it's kind of a shitstorm when you look at all the fast food at every single street corner. You got Wendy's, you got Tim here in Canada, Tim Hortons, by the way. I don't know if you've ever
Or,
had.
yeah, the coffee donut spot, of course, of course.
Yeah. Well, my husband and I were talking about this, how back in the day when we were little kids, you would walk into a Tim Hortons and it was a special treat,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And the whole place would smell of, freshly made donuts with real ingredients. And now I happen to know a few people who hopefully I don't get in shit for saying this, but who have worked there, and they come in frozen, made with God knows what ingredients. So even the fast food has changed, Misha.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and I think part of that is a lot of subsidies, right? So a lot of the government subsidizes like cut on the wrong things. So they're subsidizing corn, soy, wheat, and you look at crop insurance. So you made a comment earlier about how having GMOs can kind of grow more because things are more regulated, and you have larger consumption capabilities for the population. But a lot of these farms who don't do regenerative agriculture and don't do biodynamic farming and don't do this kind of food forestry, if they don't actually make enough money from that crop, they'll actually not sell any, not even grow any crop, any crops that season and collect crop insurance from the government to actually subsidize them not growing crops. So you're actually getting all these wastelands from generations of people who are actually losing money. And also the way they make the money is by not even growing their own crop. So, within within 1 year, you can create any property into a regenerative farm, but like food forests, you can even do faster than that, right? Like for example, this property in Gulf's Landing, St. Cloud, Jim Gale's kind of keystone property, was a sand lot 18 months ago, and that was a booming, vibrant food forest. And in 4 months is going to be one of the largest kind of ecotourism food forest bases probably in America, and probably globally, building out to that. So, I think what's really important to know is there is so much misinformation on, what is it more environmentally safe to, do, have regenerative farming and have more cows that are not factory farmed. But like if you do the math, like it actually to have it's I think it was on my slide that you saw was to have one Beyond Meat Burger and Impossible Meat Burger. It's a positive 2.75 carbon parts per billion out of the atmosphere, and to have one regenerative beef burger, it's negative 2.75 carbon parts per billion. So you need two grass-fed burgers to make the amount of carbon footprint um, as one Beyond Meat burger. So it's just really a shocking experience, to hear, unless you're an ethical vegan and unless you're also environmental vegans don't really kind of hit the mark in their arguments. So it's really interesting to see, why people are, saying the things that they're saying, and most of it's because they get bad information, and they get information that maybe is curated great, maybe it has a great, TikTok, following or
Yes.
marketing material, but really it's not actually hitting the core root of, what is this global society, like what are we facing as our problems, and we're just getting lost in the sauce and getting lost in the, they use the Yiddish term mishigas, just like the nuance of what's really happening. And what's really happening is our food systems disrupted, our healthcare systems, does not work. Our mental health, system is built for failure. Our substance abuse, and recovery system is literally built for, 80, not 98% recidivism. And, our education system is really at a nexus point where we may, or a crisis point where we actually might not be able to be a global leader in terms of, if we don't change the way our children are reading 2 generations from now, we're going to have mostly autistic and on that spectrum, children, because people are actually so toxic, and their terrain is so, corrupt by the endotoxins, environmental toxins, and so on and so forth. So, a way to do that is, to really get in nature and really get into a food forest. And that can actually be in your backyard in a cul-de-sac, right? You can actually have, avocado trees, you can have coconut trees, or coconut palms, you can have papaya trees, you can have, root vegetables everywhere, that in 7 months, you can feed hundreds of people. And then, with the greenhouses, there's so much you can do to really, change our youth, and getting the kids involved and working with, school programs, and working with schools that are thinking outside the box and thinking about presidents of universities and presidents of, public school systems to really be the champion of this is really kind of what we need, right? It's
Yeah.
a lot of these people are not getting paid enough, but if you can create almost economy for teachers and for professors to actually have ownership in some of these farms or CSAs, and they can create health credits and maybe put on the blockchain, which are potential moves we're thinking about. But I think ultimately, if we don't change the way we're eating and don't change the way we're sourcing our food, we're in a lot of trouble.
Misha, you'd probably laugh at me
I probably will.
because you probably would.
Probably will.
But so my daughter's in her first year of university, and in her last year of high school, so last year, she came home and she's like, all meat is bad. I'm like, what? What?
They got her. They got her.
I'm like, excuse me, but you are the daughter of a nutritionist who believes in balanced living without any agenda whatsoever, except for what's better for our bodies, for our environment. I don't believe in piling down tons of animal protein that is factory farmed. I don't believe in that. but I do believe in a balanced diet that is highly bioavailable foods for our
Right.
bodies, that is ethically raised and done so in such a manner that it's not overconsumption. So I actually had to re-educate my own child because of what she was hearing in high school. I'm like, who is teaching this? Where is this information coming from? Because it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong to teach highly impressionable teenagers that meat is bad as a general statement, because you said it right there. Ethical veganism, ethical vegetarianism, if that's a choice that you want to make, it's rarely done. Most of the time, you see these young kids scarfing down highly processed, beyond beef burgers and calling themselves vegetarian because they think it's better for them. And I mean, you've seen the list of ingredients, you know what's in them.
I mean, you've heard about I think we mentioned it on our panel, but I think there's essentially going to be a massive class action lawsuit in the next 5 to 10 years, probably less, with all the Beyond Beefs, Impossible Beef burgers. I think I actually mentioned this in my lecture because there was basically a push to get the FDA to approve all this stuff. There's no way, and I mean, there's no way that they could have been everything could have approved that quickly. All the different brands could have been approved that quickly. All the fast food restaurants are having it in their, within a year, all their fast food restaurants are having it in their menus. So there's a study that I got to find the study, send it to you. But there's a study that I think these rats were given Beyond Beef burgers for a week, and within like a week, all the rats were like dying because it just like was so toxic, and their bodies can't process it. And I think we, really have as a global population right now, or maybe in the Western world especially, but we have a responsibility to kind of shift this narrative and kind of
Mhm.
get people. And now you're seeing it. And maybe it's just my feed, but you after going to like KetoCon and these conferences and like kind of watching the brands that I've seen kind of start up and kind of begin their eyes, that they're telling the right narrative. Like they're telling this. I mean, I'm not a huge carnivore only person, but the things that people are saying, you weren't seeing this 2 years ago, right? And there's a shift, in consciousness within the industry, which I think is empowering the people in the industry to have a larger voice versus being a niche person. And I think a lot of like, I'm not a big fan of Paul Saladino's, approach, Dr. Paul Saladino, but
Oh, yeah.
there's an old clip of him talking with like this on the doctor. I think it's like the doctor's let's call it like the doctor's TV show or whatever, and he's on it, and this like severely overweight woman was like yelling at him for not being an actual doctor. He's like a psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever, and he was basically saying the benefits of being, kind of carnivore, eating, not eating processed foods. She's like, "How dare you say this?" Like, it just like basically people are getting paid to almost shut down these narratives, kind of like Big Pharma was. And there's a term called, vegan Nazi. I don't know if you've heard this, but these people who are like actually, planning to like convince people that, veganism is actually, the right way to go. And they kind of, maybe there's 7 or 8 arguments they use that are repetitive, but
Yes.
ultimately they be debunked in like 5 minutes if you actually look at the data. So I think, for people like us, like using your platform, I turned so many vegans, not vegan, just by eating, like having them taste really great grass-fed steak or bison or elk or whatnot, or really good fish, because a lot of these times these vegans, they're eating really highly processed foods. But whenever I cook, I mean, I'm a kind of chef and food kind of culinary
I've
artist.
had your food, Misha. I've eaten at
Yes,
one of your events.
right, right.
Yes.
So most of my food is like plant rich, right? So it's maybe
Yep.
85%, plant based, and the last 15% is your animal protein. And part of that is it's super affordable to do that for a lot of people. So when you cook for like 20, 30, 40, even 100 plus people, you think it's like you're breaking the bank, but you're actually just cooking mostly vegetables and like maybe $100 worth of meat or less. And that's like $2 or $3 a person. So really the goal is, for me at least, is to really open source this knowledge, really open source, how to, I really hate charging people for coaching. I really hate charging people for even catering or cooking for them, because it feels like this is what your parents did or what our grandparents did or what it's like almost like a birthright, like to have people know this information. And we were literally living in a pre-industrial, I mean, a post-industrial, society where we actually realized, okay, we can make a lot of money really quickly, but also, help our, military complex, the industrial complex actually save money and supply, having more resources to go fight the war and win the war. But that sacrificed us for 70 plus, almost 80 years. And now look at the impact. So by 2050, the last kind of point I'll make is by 2050, if we don't fix our current, food system, kind of in just our food system, right? Just how we eat our food. Honestly, we probably have a $114 trillion burden just on our chronic disease, not mental health, especially, but just chronic disease in terms of like medical care, aid care, medication, so on and so forth. Because everyone's going to be too sick, right? And the global GDP today is about 114 trillion. So 118, 114. So like ultimately, we don't have enough money to fix this one problem. It's just this one problem. There's so many other problems we have facing our globe. So, it's almost like a global security issue where we have to fix this problem fast. And, there's a lot of people out there who are working on solutions, but we have to kind of come together and create, one narrative that people can actually really listen and follow to. And that's what I try to do.
I think this is really important to know because, everything I do, everything I talk about is about balance. And we've lost that balance. So you're either strict veganism or you're carnivore or you're this or you're
Right.
that. And it's like, you know, if people stop, or, you're sober living because you don't believe in touching any alcohol because Huberman says it will damage your brain, or Doc Amen will say this. And it's like, oh my gosh, like whatever happened to just everything in balance? Maybe if we weren't over consuming everything on one end, that we could live kind of somewhere in the middle, we wouldn't be running into these problems. Or I can't even tell you how many people messaged me. There are a few of these documentaries out there. I'm sure you've seen them all, Misha. But where you, like myself as a nutritionist, I can actually see through it and see what the agenda is now.
Well, it's propaganda. I mean, it's
Right?
propaganda. Propaganda is 70% facts, 30% bullshit. So
Yes.
that's where you. Sorry for swearing. I don't know if it's a
You can
family.
swear as much as you want. It's all good.
Yes. No. So I just now this changes the whole interview. Perfect. No, but I think like that's really important. I mean, I think that the balance thing you were saying. Well, back to propaganda. So, I just think that there is and I hate saying it's like a financial motive, but the people are just confused also, and people at the top are also confused. And yes, there is a financial motive with some of these, Beyond Meat companies to tell these narratives, but in reality, it feels like a kind of a much darker thing happening where people can't be this friggin' clueless, right? But like I meet a lot of really smart, people who are really smart in their own lane, who are a psychologist or a scientist or a doctor or a life coach or whatever, but they really believe they're experts in almost everything. So there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you heard of this?
No, tell
You
me.
should, you should Google it. But basically, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a lot of doctors, lawyers, engineers, pilots, mechanics, really good mechanics have it, where they think if they're really great at one thing, like they're really like the top of the tier in the industry at their one craft, very technical craft, they have to do a lot of training to have. They believe they're great at everything, right? A
Mm.
lot of it's like a level of narcissism that's acute, but basically it's like a it's what you're seeing a lot of. I mean, I hate saying this, but like you're seeing a lot of with these doctors or these random people who become health experts. Where you're like, you're not a health expert, you're a chiropractor, or you're like sure, a lot of Chinese medicine practitioners have a great foundation on a lot of this stuff, but a lot of things people are saying are based off of maybe a little group of like kind of like with Trump, right? He's saying things and he knows people will get behind. He's most of it is like pseudo genius because he's actually like kind of talking like from the streets where he's actually trying to get people like they're getting their dopamine hits, right? People are hitting their dopamine rushes and they want to fall for that narrative. It works, doesn't work, whatever you want to, however you want to see it. But I think in the wellness space, most of it's just like a dopamine. I mean, I'm watching like these recovering addicts or athletes or workaholics, people who struggle from codependency just fall for all this stuff because they're just straight dopamine addicts. And I think what we're really not doing is, as you said, putting people in balance, right? And a lot of the stuff is like orthorexia. Are you familiar with the term orthorexia?
Oh shit, yeah. That's
Yeah.
I was orthorexic for many years, my dear, after
Yeah.
I had my thyroid out, and I can
Yeah.
fully admit that now and see it in hindsight. But yeah, I feel you.
Oh, it's almost the most debilitating thing for people. I mean, I think you, in one of your questions, sorry for jumping ahead, of like, how do you get started? It's you cannot be an orthorexic. It has to be like a 90-10, 85-10, or I hate saying 80-20 because people can push that 20 to like 29. But it is balanced, but it's not balanced 50-50. It's the way, the way my dad kind of would say it to me as a kid is, think of like tequila as like a recreational drug. Think of sugar as a recreational drug. You're not going to do cocaine 10 days a week. You're not, or 10 days a month. You're not going to do, McDonald's 10 days a month. Like you just need to like, or people do, but you got to think about it is if you want to have a little treat here or there, maybe like know that, okay, if I have a, key lime pie tonight, I'm not going to be focused for my interview tomorrow with Sandy. So I maybe will avoid key lime pie and just, have nice, miso soup or something. So now I think what we really need to realize as practitioners is we do, or healers or, nutritionists or chefs or doctors, is we do scare a lot of our patients to make them, or our clients, or people who are working with us, to make them think they have to be orthorexic, they has to be a certain way. Because what you're saying is there is that level of, you need to have grace, right? If you don't have grace,
Mm.
if you don't have, uh, I hate saying patience, but if you don't have ease in your practice, it will spike up your hormones, it'll screw up your cortisol levels, it'll create stress that will actually create a almost toxic environment for healing. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that is they're actually like an engine and a machine that can turn on and off these different frequencies. If you use breath work, you do yoga, you listen to, frequencies, binaural beats, 528, hertz, whatever, on YouTube. There's so many things now in the 21st century that we can tap into that high level, with brain tap and all these biohacking tools we have to tap into that quote unquote higher level of consciousness, or that lower level of frequency or higher level of vibration, to not be so, have our nervous system so corrupt. And I think we really need to just have grace in our healing practice, because a lot of people are like, why am I not there yet? Well, if you take the steps every day to get there, and then sure, 1 or 2 days you fall off, you just get back on the horse. And if you don't
Mhm.
get back on the horse, then you won't see your effects. But more often than not, if you do it in community and you have someone next to you who's supporting you, it's much easier than doing it alone. So I think it's really important to like either do it with a loved one, a family member, a friend group, or maybe having a therapist you work with that can hold you accountable. But yeah.
Grace is huge. And, again, you mentioned grace, and then I immediately thought, and we can even move on to that whole question about um, eating to placate those feelings that we might feel, right? If you're
Yeah.
talking, right? So this is interesting. So we're recording this on January 3rd. We had the holidays, we had New Year's, I was in Vegas last month. It was a month of overindulgence. And for me, I'm talking about me, and almost like I had blinders on. And I think a lot of people go through life like that, not thinking about what they're putting in their body, just eating to kind of satisfy those feelings, those emotions that you're feeling. And if you never come out of it, sure, we got to give ourselves grace. It's the holidays, Misha, going to Vegas, having a night of a few drinks, but you got to come back to that awareness. I think those tools that you mentioned are how you do that. It's like clearing up the fog.
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned a lot of stuff there that I, want to just acknowledge. But I think like the whole, like when you start overindulging and you start kind of falling into that pattern, it almost creates like a very easy path to have the blinders, right?
Yeah.
Because you become numb, you almost become, you get the brain fog, you get the gluten brain, you get,
Yeah.
the just like the whenever whenever inflammation kind of gets into your brain, your inhibitions kind of, you get less of that subconscious talking to you and saying, hey, maybe it's not a good idea or not, and it really can kind of snowball. But the one thing about, so for me, I'm also recovering eating. I've recovered obesity survivor, as I said, in the 300-pound club, as you mentioned. But also, like binge eating is something I struggle with a lot. So I try to only eat when I'm starving or anxious, and that's a fair amount of times. Because I'm rarely ever hungry, because I'm always like, if I intermittent fast, and I can fast for like 70 hours and not be starving because I had a giant meal, maybe, you know 3 days ago, because I was nervous about something and stressed. And but the thing with like eating disorders, it's a really kind of tricky form of codependency, and most codependency is, a lot of people use substances or workaholism or sex or love addiction. But for those who don't know what codependency is, essentially anyone that has trauma as a child grows up with a way to cope with that trauma, and any coping mechanism essentially is a codependency, um, and is a codependent behavior. And most of the, I mean, you see it a lot with like substance abuse and alcoholism and whatnot. It's pretty typical. But essentially, every single person with substance abuse has codependency, but not everyone with codependency has substance abuse. Just to put that out there. And then, um, but one of the things that are really tricky is if you want to go sober, of drinking or substance abuse, you just don't have to go to the bar, don't go to your friend's house with the drugs, don't go to the parties. But if you're, suffering from an eating disorder and you want to be abstinent, it can actually happen. You'll die, right? So you have to actually eat, once a day, maybe a couple times a week, but you have to actually eat. And other people, when you meet with them, will be eating. And you go to 3 times a day, you have to eat food, or according to our, our Western way of seeing the world. Uh, but it's just, for me, really tricky, because, when you work with people who suffer from eating disorders, you actually have to reframe food, instead of it being a pleasure to stop a feeling, or a way to cope and escape to stop a feeling. You actually can use it as a tool to feel better, or to actually feel, cleaner or faster, as almost have it be information and data than kind of a substance you're going to be used to escape. So I think, it's really tricky, especially during the holidays, as you're saying, is people who are suffering from eating disorders, they're around food, and unhealthy food typically, like a lot. And it's kind of the whole basis of our society now, is eating around food. If you look at the ancient Eastern cultures and ancient cultures around the world, the big meal and the big feast was a moment of sustenance, not a moment of gluttony. You get to the Romans, and they start doing the glutton kind of movement. You had the vomitoriums they would build just to, go there and throw up. There's like a whole thing of just overeating and throwing up. So it's really shocking to see how we are almost like reliving that as a society, where we are literally have become gluttons. And then when we get more stressed, more anxious, we, instead of, tapping into our higher power and higher self, we were actually, becoming, one of the seven deadly sins, which are being glutton, and is creating chronic disease, mental health, and so on.
You know what I just noticed? I just realized this. It just happened so authentically, is our entire conversation. The theme is balance. Because again, it all boils down to balance. Because
Right.
there's orthorexics on the one hand. Oh my God, I can't touch that. That's not quote unquote healthy. And I won't eat that. And I have to exercise till, I feel like my brain is going to explode because it's healthy. So there's that extreme. And then because I've seen it, you've seen it in this industry, where you see people who are dead afraid of eating one carb,
Oh,
afraid to death. That was me, Misha. I was terrified. And so, I live my life, and then you think about the emotion that that's tied to, and it's all fear driven. And then the other one is, let's just numb everything out with food, right? It's
Mhm.
again the other extreme. So it's almost like our entire society, as it relates to food, and health and wellness and exercise and everything, it's like we've forgotten how to just be balanced humans. Do a little bit of everything. Enjoy in awareness.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the most kind of reoccurring thing that I keep seeing is people are so out of touch with actually their human or their kind of
Yeah.
their genetic, who they're genetically disposed to be in the environment. Because remember, 150 years ago, we were basically living a totally different world. We were all, almost like living in medieval or medieval kind of lifestyles where we had to like hunt our own food, find our own water, and homesteading was like a real deal. We were living like with the indigenous, but kind of killing most of them by our disease and smallpox. So it's shocking to really see how within three or four like really 4 or 5 generations, we have actually probably disconnected ourselves from our entire race of humans of how we can actually survive in the wild. Because everything shut
Mm,
down tomorrow, we're both of us are screwed. Um,
yeah.
large population of us are screwed. We look around the world, and you go to Africa, you go to India, you go to Asia, you go to parts of Russia. People will just be living the way they used to live for thousands of years, because they have this ancient ancestral wisdom, that they that comes with nutritional wisdom that was been passed down by generations and generations for thousands of years, that we really lost because of this whole industrial food complex, TV dinners and convenient dinners. And we the reason why we're eating so much is because the food that we're designed to eat is designed to make us crave right after we eat food. And I think part of the food that I make for people, I mean, again, it's whole real food. You're not hungry for like 12 to 18 hours because you have so many nutrients in your body working, and a lot of fiber and a lot of real whole ingredients that are actually fueling healing and not just propagating up addiction.
Okay. Now, I always say this because, like, as you know, I have kids and they eat a lot of shit. Okay. So I love the term, what is it, death by a million cuts or a thousand cuts, a million cuts? I think that's what it is. So I'm always saying, listen, if you want to have your little treat once in a blue moon, go for it. But when you think about what's contained in that food, the quality of the meat, the seed oils, the way that it's probably got, I don't even know what the additives and preservatives would be in that, but it's like it has all of these things. So if you're that person that's constantly eating that garbage, it may not affect your health today, but it will down the line, 100%. But how are you ever, and then people are going to go, well, you'll never know if the food is the reason. But I would say there's enough evidence to say food
I think it's
can
always
be medicine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always the reason for me, and maybe I'm biased because I subscribe to the notion that food is medicine, but like food is information, right? So
Yes.
there's a lot of information that we can have or we can kind of garner if if we're getting really sick and have continual health issues and are on a lot of medication. Get on a 30-day, I hate saying a cleanse, but 30-day no processed food, no processed sugar, whole real food. You can have a lot of good salt and good spices and all over the world, curries and a lot of really amazing spices, ingredients you can get from all over the world that would shock you that you don't need to have just sugar in your food. And go on like a 30-day cleanse, and you'd be shocked that most people have to get off their medications, they lose a bunch of weight, they heal a bunch of their chronic disease, their mental health, increases. And that's not with doing sauna, cold plunge, biohacking, yoga, exercise. That's just eating real food. So I think people, if they really think about like the cost of a can of Coke, it's not like 40 cents. It's about like $86. Did you have that in your diet all the time, and you're actually, factoring in your medical bills and your the insurance bills and so on and so forth, and the aid care, because we're really paying for us now, whatever you're eating now. And I mean, again, right? You can have, fast food once in a while if you're in a rush. No one's really judging, everyone all the time. But the truth is, what you're putting in your body now is an investment for what you want your future to be like. And your
Mhm.
future can be in like 2 days, right? Like when I eat something kind of trashy today, I have a business meeting on Friday. I'm going to feel a little bit of that on Friday. If I want to feel super sharp, like before I go to the biohacking congress, I will not like eat processed food probably for a week, just because I know I'm going to be engaging and have to be up, probably 18 hours a day talking to people. And so it's like almost like I'm training for a marathon. And part of that training is, okay, I'm going to intermittent fast and only eat all real good, great stuff. I'm going to hydrate. I'm going to have my electrolytes. I'm going to make sure I'm not, overly dehydrated when I'm talking to all these people, because when you're dehydrated, your brain shuts down, and your body can shut down, obviously. So, we'll be in Florida versus being in New York. So you got to just always be aware of your, utility. And I think a lot of people, like you were saying, once you can get in that habit of, I mean, I do it myself when I eat junk food in the morning or junk food in the, early in the day, all day. I'm just like, okay, whatever, sure. Let's go to Publix. Let's
Me
go somewhere.
too.
Let's get that.
You throw
And
it in the fuck it bucket
bucket
and you
bucket.
just, right?
Exactly.
I've done
Exactly.
that, obviously. I've done that. And I did that for a few days over Christmas. And I was like, I feel like a bag of shit. And I think the more that you do it, the more numbing you are. It's almost like, oh my God, I just had this thought. It's almost like, you know how they say alcoholics, what is that? Hair of the dog.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so that they don't feel shitty the next day, they'll just start drinking again. It's kind of like the same with food. It's like you start and you numb, and you might feel kind of like initially you're like, "Ooh, that made me feel shitty. I'll just keep eating this way." And then
Well,
it's like
it's
you're
that dopamine spike.
perpetuating.
Left the dopamine spike. So you're chasing that kind of
Yeah.
chasing the dragon, right? On the heroin lingo, but you're chasing that dopamine rush. And I mean, I see a lot of that in people with business. Like even, I mean, I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of people that I met at that biohacking conference that I was working with, we would like sell them these, we would like, I'm a consultant. We build businesses with people. We collaborate with people. And there was like 6 or 7 people I was working with, built all ideas with, spent like weeks of my time just working with them. And they were just chasing that dopamine rush, which was either the money at the end or the fame or whatever. And just watching people just who are in this, and a lot of people in our industry are recovering, either addicts or they're workaholics or they're food addicts or they have chronic disease, but they're chasing that high, which is that dopamine hit, which is why the balance is so important. Because when you're in actual balance, a dopamine spike, that serotonin spike it's enjoyable, but you don't have to chase it to get back to
Yeah.
homeostasis. And that's what you're seeing a lot with food is people are actually just chasing that high, but then you wake up in the morning, you feel like shit. Same thing as hair as a dog. They're chasing that dopamine rush or to
Yeah.
regulate. Because people who are suffering from substance abuse, especially eating disorders, are chronically sick and obese or diabetes, whatever, they're super depleted, and they need extra dopamine, extra sugar, extra, what to get them to that point. Uh, so it's so important to get people back to homeostasis, and I think that's why the biohacking for me kind of was a no brainer. Just understanding it is all it is putting people. All it is like you're trying to put your body in the best place to survive, and you're trying to reset your body to like the factory settings. Is essentially where if you look at every one of these brands, that's kind of what they're all doing. They're like, okay, how do we get your levels perfect? How do we fix your levels on this? How do we fix your brain? How do we, fix your, mitochondria? Well, most of that's because we're not in balance. I think
Yeah.
that's a great point that you made.
Yeah. And then we're coming close to an hour, but I can't not cover
We
this
can always do a part two. We could always come on next week and
I
do it.
know, right? Because I have to talk about this because I think there's a couple of food myths that we have to cover. So, two things. Salt is bad. Go.
Oh, salt. So salt.
Salt is bad. I'm doing a quote unquote because everyone's like, "Oh my God, I got to lower my salt intake. Oh my God, salt is so bad for you. It's giving me high blood pressure." I want to hear your take on it, please, because I think you talked about this at the Congress.
Yeah, so I think part of salt being bad is part of that narrative that we got from the food industrial complex is that we had to have more sugar and less salt. And I mean, even my grandmother would say, "Oh, there's so much salt in the food. My ankles are swollen." Well, your ankles are swollen because you're probably having iodized salt, really, really bad salt that's in the food. Iodized salt, which was just stripped of every nutrient besides iodine.
Yeah.
And they put iodine in the salt in a really, toxic, amount. And I think ultimately, we have this whole misconception. I mean, your Morton sea salt, the iodized salt should be in your cleaning cabinet, not in your cooking cabinet, right?
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you met. Did you go to Dave Asprey's conference?
Oh yeah.
So you met
I haven't
you haven't
gone.
gone? So there was a brand there called Oryx Salt, and I actually didn't know about the Kalahari Desert Sea Salt until like this June. But actually, like if you have a nutrient deficient diet, you actually need more salt, but you need good salt. So a lot of people they believe Himalayan sea salt was the best salt. Um, I thought that for a long time. They're actually finding out there's a lot of pollutants and a lot of toxins in Himalayan sea
Yeah.
salt, depending where you get it. Now that the
Be
ice is
careful,
melting.
people. I just want to interrupt because I know of so many people who go to Costco and they just buy this generic brand of Himalayan salt. Just I just wanted to tag on to what you were saying because I actually have been researching that lately too. Be careful with what Himalayan salt you use. Sorry, I had to interrupt you
Yeah,
there.
no, it's very true, and part of it's like the ice caps are melting, and we're actually getting more toxins in our salt now. Before it was kind of so safe because it was under all this ice. Um, Other good salt you could have is Hawaiian red salt or black salt. That's kind of more expensive, like volcanic salt. But the best salt in the world is probably not probably is this Kalahari Desert sea salt because basically even Celtics the sea salt from all over the world they're finding even like Plan B. They're finding like traces of Zoloft. They're finding all this crap that's in our salt that we're putting in our bodies. So Kalahari Desert sea salt is like a 300-foot strata underground, like a giant cave. That's like the most pure salt in the world. And you can actually get them on Amazon and use my Chef Misha as a discount code, get 10% off. But they're called Oryx sea salt. They have them at Whole Foods.
Can you
Um,
spell that? How is this?
Oryx, like the
O
deer.
O
Oryx,
R Y X.
yes. And
Okay.
then they had their best kind of year ever this past year, and they're really blowing up. But I think they're kind of working with me to work with other brands to kind of get salt out of their product and get their salt in. They're actually doing price matches. So anybody listening to this has any health products or food products that has a salt source, we can get you them. We can match their price and just get better salt for you because yeah, a lot of the salt really is confusing people, also getting people sick, and also like with the keto flu, a lot of people are getting this thing when they do ketogenic diets because they actually don't have enough salt in their diet. But then you see everybody with their Himalayan sea salt bags, some of those can be pretty toxic. So you want to have, Kalahari sea salt if you can, or Kalahari desert salt if you can. Um,
What about
and
Redmond?
Edmonds is okay, but again, they've done tests where like they're actually showing traces of like, prescription medication and big pharma kind of toxins that you just don't want in your salt. So the goal is like get the thing as farthest away from the source of the toxicity. So 300 feet underwater or under the ground is like pretty safe for now in Africa, near the Kalahari Desert. So if anybody
Okay.
needs really good salt, that's the way to go.
Okay.
But yeah, if you have Himalayan sea salt is the best option, yeah, do that because a lot of this iodized salt is super, super, super toxic.
Okay, that's good because like I want to also say it's really important that you get that when you get a good quality salt, it's highly mineralized.
Yeah.
And when your minerals are imbalanced, which electrolytes, right? Like the fact is, people don't get it. They just think, oh, Gatorade, electrolytes. I'm like,
Oh God.
no, but right? Am I right? That's what they think. And it's like, hold on a minute. You need to understand that electrolytes is that's what actually causes me to move my hand here. It's like an electrical surge in your body. So if your electrolytes are imbalanced, it's hard to be healthy without a balanced, mineralized body. You can't even absorb your vitamins properly without balanced minerals, right?
Exactly. And I think what you're saying is so important. So even a lot of these, like Gatorade's an extreme case. I think people are kind of understanding that Gatorade's a kind of sugary, toxic drink for people who are in the wellness space. Athletes still use it way too much, but you get all these other like electrolyte companies, they're still full of sugar. They're still full of
Yeah.
like aspartame and other things. So you rarely see electrolytes that are kind of hitting the mark. There is one brand called Elite. Have you heard of them? They're just like it's basically pure electrolytes. Take a tap, put it in water. It doesn't taste great, but that's probably the purest one you can get. They're pretty cheap. You can buy on Amazon.
Have you heard
Um,
of Body Bio's electrolytes?
I,
Body
yeah,
Bio?
yeah, I have actually.
They have it where you can, it comes in a bottle and you just put like a cap full in a glass of water. But you know what I like to do, Misha, is I like to take, okay, I've been using Redmond, so I'm gonna have to research that now and look at this.
And Redmond's is
Or
okay, but yeah, Redmond's is
I'm
okay.
gonna look at this salt that you're talking about. But what I do is I take a pinch of just a really good quality salt. I put it under my tongue so that, highly mineralized sublingual, and then I drink my water. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Like I used to teach my clients to do Sole water many years ago with a good, take a teaspoon of the Sole water and a good quality salt that settles at the bottom. Just, I think people need to understand that salt, unless it's really, really poor quality salt, is not bad for you. And it doesn't cause disease if it's a good quality salt.
Right,
That's a
exactly.
good
But
myth.
and sodium, yeah, and sodium is very important. And I think a lot of people think sodium is they look at their ingredients like, oh, that's 500 milligrams of sodium. I'm done. Well, okay, but what are the other ingredients? What are the carbs? What are the sugars? And I think people they're just catching on to these things that we are taking for granted. But I think ultimately, like, yeah, that's a great myth to kind of break because you're right.
Yeah.
I forgot that a lot of people are very salt averse, and especially people who are overweight who have way too much sugar and think salt's going to make them bloated. It's almost the complete opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I have to touch on sugar. And the reason, okay, I'll tell you a little story. Back when I was keto, long time ago. I know you still like to eat that way, and I do not believe in a lot of highly processed carbs, but I don't label myself. I used to. And I started baking with all kinds of these non-caloric sweeteners, erythritol, monk
Okay.
fruit.
Yeah.
I was using Swerve. And so here I was, supposedly keto, and I'm like, shit, I really want to have a cookie. And then I'm like, the only way I can have a cookie is if I bake with this shit that tastes like shit. And it had this would weird have this weird aftertaste. I'm like, well, how is stevia, which is actually a plant, green, turned into a white powder? So you talked about this. I'm going to let you take this away.
Oh God. Okay. So, um, yeah. I mean, even now I'm saying with a friend, and I'm gonna, he's a big time artist, and we're doing a big art event at Art Basel, and I was kind of doing the big wellness event at his locations, but he's like drinking Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke, Diet, Dr. Pepper like every day, like
Mm,
it's water. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like I'm putting on a wellness plan. And he's like so addicted to it. He's from like New Jersey and he's like 46 years old. And he's like, it's kind of typical. Like that in that age group, people think diet soda is like a health drink. My grandfather, when he was dying, was having two it was the Diet Coke caffeine free, like the gold cans. And it was like his like drink of choice. Um, like 6, 7, 8 a day, and you saw this narrative where people would vilify sugar and say diet's the way to go because it just says diet. It's just marketing, right?
yeah.
And typically, it just should just say sugar free. Um, so I think there was a list that I had of like 248 types of sugar replacements. I think there's more now. There's probably like 500 to 1,000 probably now if I had to research it again. But ultimately, there's all these sugar replacements that actually does almost the same thing to your pancreas. It
Yeah.
convinces your body that it is sugar, so you're actually having the same metabolic process and the same physiological response to these fake sugars. but you're actually not getting the nutrient and the glucose kind of effect out of it. So it's almost like a fake response. Your body actually has more cravings and you get more sick. So a lot of people who are food addicts or substance abuse addicts or whatever, they almost are always sugar addicts, like specifically sugar addicts, right? And then when I was watching, I mean, I had this ex-girlfriend that was like a stevia addict, and she was like smoking. I mean, she was also a cigarette addict as well, and actually that's also an alcoholic. Fuck. Um, she was like put stevia
I'm
in there.
glad you can talk about it now and kind of laugh about it,
Oh, I
Misha.
talked about it then too.
Yes, you did.
No, but no, she would like put stevia, and it would freak out. Like she would put stevia in her water and like stevia in her like bubbly water, and I would like take a sip of my can of like LaCroix, and it'd be like sugary, and she just like in her coffee, and she wouldn't go anywhere without it. So like literally have a little. This is like S60, it's not sugar, but we just take it everywhere and put it in her drinks, and that is an addiction, right? You're searching for that dopamine hit, and like for me, the only sugar I really have is like mezcal when I drink, right? And I try not to really ever have sugar. That when I do, I can feel it like coming on, or I try to do it really late at night, so I have to go to sleep and can't binge all day. Um, but I think one of the things with sugar is if we're gonna actually have sugar or have sweets, you might as well have organic cane sugar or sugar in the raw
Oh
milk.
my God, you're
Just have the
speaking my
yeah,
language.
yeah. Or like we with this food forest, this guy Jim, you can get sugar cane so easy to grow. Just chew on it, and it's like natural sugar cane, or you can squeeze it yourself and make sugar juice. But like that's like the real thing, right? We're getting so far. I mean, you made that point of how's a green stevia plant turned into a white powder, right? So that's processed, even though it's only one or two ingredients, it's still processed food, right? And we're going so far away from the original source, our body can't always understand that information, right? Like you're actually taking the food through a translator. So how can our body translate that information? I think is really important. So I guess to finalize that point on my end is if you do sugar, like go have a tablespoon of real whole sugar and that should do it for the week or the day, whatever. But ultimately, all these alternatives, they're actually doing worse things for your body and also doing the same thing to your pancreas, which is actually creating that whole sugar kind of process to the kidneys. And in reality, you're almost convinced you're tricking your body, but in reality, your body's not buying the bullshit, and you're
Yeah.
actually something about that process.
Yeah. I love how you just put it. Your body is not buying the bullshit.
Pretty
So
much.
all these people who do all this baking with all of these highly processed non-caloric sweeteners, like make it with real sugar, maybe tone it down. Like I know my mom, she loves to bake, but she always goes a lot less on real
Yeah.
organic cane sugar.
Sorry.
Um,
Oh no. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, she always goes, lower on, but she uses real organic cane sugar. And for some reason, here's the other interesting thing, which is what you're talking about. You only want to have one. So have the damn cookie. Have one cookie. For some reason, when you go less on the sugar and it's real sugar, you'll have one. Whereas back when I used to do all that baking shit with all the other stuff like Swerve and everything, I would like eat the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it's more addictive. It's actually more addictive because when things are super highly processed, they actually become more addictive because your body doesn't know what it is. It needs more of it, needs more of the
Yeah.
nutrients, needs more of the information. Because when you're satiated and you have enough nutrients in your body from a big whole real meal, you're not chasing that dopamine rush. And you're
Yeah.
not, and the dopamine rush is, part of it is just unresolved trauma for a lot of people, right? So that's when you like can do the mindful eating, when you can kind of put meditation and mindfulness into your eating routine. I think there's like 36 different volumes of it now since it first came out in the 70s. Um, but there's a book called Mindful Eating that is a pretty good tool for a lot of people. I'm assuming you know about it. You mentioned it 3 or 4 times.
I
Um,
did I did a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy coaching.
okay.
So I know more about the mindfulness surrounding eating, but I still haven't finished that course. I'll get to it, Misha. There's too many things that we got to
Don't let
do.
school get in the way of your education. You're doing great. Exactly.
And the one thing I will say, which is honestly, it saved my life as a menopausal woman, is if you're having cravings, sugar cravings, have an apple, one apple every single day at the end of your meal, not as a separate snack. But let's say, a lot of times with people, they're eating and then they're like, damn, I need something else. Have an apple. It's amazing how nutrient dense an apple is, and it's somehow with the fiber, the pectin, everything kind of eliminates more cravings through the day. I just have to add that in because it really helped me personally.
Yeah,
So
no,
simple.
that's a really good point. It's you're actually you're getting your so instead of having like a juice or like refined sugar, you're getting all the fiber with the glucose. You're getting all the nutrients with the glucose, and you're actually having a whole real meal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the beautiful thing is if you have it at the end of your meal, you don't need to worry about insulin coming to the rescue 2 hours later. It's already got to process what you just ate. So, okay, let's wrap this up. Um, I would like for you to tell me if there's anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about, and then where can everyone find you?
Um, yeah, I think we covered a lot. I think my mission, I think, is pretty obvious. Is we want to help the world heal, through a food as medicine approach, through you know creating food forests and creating wellness centers on these food forests. But we also are working pretty closely with a lot of low income communities, and especially with Native American reservations and also First Nations up in North America or up in Canada
Mhm.
to actually create these food forests and wellness centers for the indigenous, for them, by them, basically helping them build an infrastructure that can actually help heal humanity. So I think one of the things that we're dealing with is we're dealing with a big climate crisis right now, and a lot of it is because we are losing our topsoil and we're losing
Mm.
a way to create carbon back into our environment. So one of the best ways to do that is through regenerative farming, and secondly, or probably even primarily food forests. So we're going to be working with these indigenous tribal nations. There's 538 reservations sitting on 55 million acres. 44 million are publicly owned, 11 privately owned inside the tribes. But we're actually going to be working with them to create food forests and create infrastructures and food forest abundance academies, freedom farm academies to actually help people take back their health. And a lot of these tribal nations, they have the worst rate of chronic disease, mental health, suicide, in youth and also as an adults, and substance abuse. And I think what we're doing is to really fix these core issues, and we have to give them to people who actually can continue these traditions and continue to educate us how to go back in time and go back to our ancient ways to actually heal our future problems, or else there's no way we're going to get out of this issue. So if
Mm.
anybody has a indigenous tribal member or works with a reservation, they want us to help out and build infrastructure with you guys to create food forests and economy for your community. We're here to help, but also if you could always just cook for your neighbor, cook for someone in your community to really show them how easy it is to get healthy and do it together. So that is kind of my shtick, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. And teach your kids to cook.
Teach your kids to cook.
Teach
Exactly.
your kids to cook. Raise them right. Thank you. Where can we find you, Misha?
So you can find me on my Instagram at the Health Warrior Project, or at my website, thehealthwarriorproject.com, or my other company, the Biohaus. We have at the Biohaus, HAUS, on Instagram, or thebiohaus.org, which is a trauma-informed kind of biohacking healing center where every kind of food forest that we have, we build these wellness centers on that property. That is kind of a subsequent company within the Health Warrior Project, where we kind of both of them are essentially at the same services, but the Biohaus is more of a brick and mortar kind of location set company. So we have centers all over the country where people come in and they can actually learn a lot of these biohacking techniques and ancient Eastern medicine to Ayurvedic medicine to indigenous medicine in North and South America to actually help people heal in a 360 wraparound approach.
Beautiful. You're doing such great things. I love
Oh,
what
okay.
you're doing. You're a
Thank
good person, Misha. Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you.
My guy, no problem. And we're gonna get you connected with all my freedom farmers up there, and we'll get a farm near you guys ASAP.
All right. Thanks, Misha.
No problem. Take
Okay.
care.
I hit stop on the
Great.
audio.